Good afternoon, everyone. Today at Phonetica Spoken Institute Private Limited, we are going to talk about one of the important topics which everybody needs to understand, which is learning English sounds. This is Dr. Atul Aman, Director of Phonetica Spoken Institute Private Limited. So, when we talk about sounds, the important thing is to understand which is pronunciation. So, when we pronounce a certain word in English, we must be very assured with how exactly we are pronouncing specific sounds. So, in front of you there are multiple words which are mentioned, and there are slight differences among those words which are written beside the given words in separate sections. So, the first word is wet, wet, v, v. The next word is wet, 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 wet. So, as you can clearly see that the difference between v and v is clearly visible. But have you ever wondered that when you pronounce these specific words, there is, and if you are not conscious about how you are pronouncing these sounds, these words, then you might appear problematic when you pronounce these sounds. Either you can mix, you can use v in place of v, or vice versa. Similarly, the next series of words, zoo, z, z, judge, j, ch, judge, pleasure, pleasure. So, there are three different sounds which are identical, but they are very much different if you talk about using it among words. So, the sounds are z, which is used in zoo, judge, which is j, j, and the third one is pleasure. So, z, z. So, I am sure you might mix any of these sounds which are identical in nature. The third series of word, you can say tortoise, tortoise. Now, there will be number of pronunciations, variations which you can bring while pronouncing this sound, but the correct pronunciation is tortoise. And then we have cold, cold. So, over here what we need to check is the way how we are pronouncing the vowel sound, which is o and oi. So, when we say tortoise, what we are doing, how we are pronouncing this vowel sound is different from what we do when we say cold, o basically. Now, another series of word is school, snow, straight, fill. Now, these are some random words which I have selected, and if you casually say these sounds and if you try to understand the difference between the vowels and the consonants which you find among these sounds, you will get a very clear idea that either you are mispronouncing these sounds, or there are some slight changes, slight differences among these vowels and consonants while we produce these sounds. So, let us talk about the nature of these sounds in detail in the upcoming slides. Before we talk about how these sounds are produced, how the function works when we talk about our auditory channel, let us understand stress. So, what is stress? Now, when we talk about stress in linguistics, and that is what our intention is, we understand that it refers to the emphasis placed on a certain syllable or words in spoken languages. Now, when we talk about stress, we are focusing on the emphasis which we are putting on a particular syllable. In our other videos, we have discussed about what syllables are, but when we say in a nutshell, we can say that syllables are the unit of sounds which are important when you produce a particular word. And syllables are represented through the presence of vowels and the break which you actually give within words. So, if you talk about what are the components of syllables, we have onset, peak and coda, and we decide syllables among these properties. So, either we can have onset peak or peak coda, or we can have peak. So, we have discussed about syllables in detail in one of our videos where you can check it out. Now, this emphasis, the stress emphasis can affect the volume, the pitch, length or the tone of the syllable or word, making it stand out in comparison to non-stressed syllables or words. For example, in English, the word record can mean either a device for a recording sound. When the stress is on the first syllable, so we say record, 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 or the act of recording sound when the stress is on the second syllable, when we say record. So, the first one is understood as a noun and the other one, the second one, is understood as a verb, which is records. So, when I say that I wanted a record for my use, I am focusing on the first syllable, and when we say that I want to record somebody on air, I am recording myself over here, I can say the stress is on the second syllable, which is the word verb. Now, similarly, we have multiple differences. There are different types of stress, which we can quickly see. So, the first one is the lexical stress, which is used to distinguish between words or word forms within a single language. So, when we say lexical stress, we are focusing on a word which has a dictionary entry, that is what lexeme mean. So, the word contract, which is a noun, again we are focusing on the first syllable, that is this particular part which is capitalized, which means a written or a spoken agreement, especially one concerning employment, sales or tenancy. And the other one, which is supposed to be a verb, where we put stress in the second syllable, which is contract, which is to decrease in size, number or range. So, this is where we put differences among words, and this is where we put stress as per the usage. The second type of stress is actually understood as a sentential stress, which is also known as prosodic stress. It is used to emphasize particular words within a sentence, often to highlight contrast or to convey a specific intention or emotion. Now, let us take example of sentential stress. I never said she stole my money. I will repeat, I never said she stole my money. Over here, I am putting stress on she, which means implying somebody else saying this. The second sentence, which says, I never said she stole my money. So, this implies it was not said at all. And the third one is, I never said she stole my money. So, implying it was implied or communicated in another way. So, when we actually focus stress within these sentences, the meaning also changes. And this is where we take use of sentential stress. The third type of stress we understand is primary or secondary stress, where we talk about the languages with complex syllable structures. A word might have one syllable with primary stress and one or more syllables with secondary stress, which is less prominent than the primary but more than unstressed syllables. We consider it as a secondary stress. So, primary stress we already have, and secondary is where we put the second amount of, the second time we put stress, that becomes the secondary stress. So, it becomes very tricky to understand what is going to be the secondary stress, but let us try to find out over here. So, the first example, which is photograph, over here photograph. over here the stress is given at the first syllable, which is fur. So, the primary stress is on the first syllable and the other syllables are less stressed, which are mentioned. So, there are 3 syllables here, photograph. So, you can see the first part, the first syllable is getting the primary stress. And when we talk about the secondary stress in photographic, you see that the word graphic, the part graphic receives the secondary stress. So, the primary stress shifts, in the second word, which is photographic, you see that the primary stress shifts to the second syllable from the end syllable, and the first syllable receives secondary stress. So, what we have seen in photograph, the difference you can find out when you say the next other word, which is photographic. So, the first stress, the primary stress shifts from first syllable to the second syllable, which is graphic, whereas the first syllable gets the secondary stress. And the third syllable is less stressed compared to the first and second. Now, after understanding what stress is and how stress works, we can compare Hindi and English stress. So, we can say that Hindi stress is a weak stress, but we can predict how stress is given at multiple syllables. Hindi speakers are disinclined to swallow unstressed syllable, just as the first syllable in the words intelligent or remember, and will often try to clearly articulate short common words that are usually weakly stressed in English, which are has, and, was, to, etc. So, as you can see that in Hindi, people are prone to swallow unstressed syllables, and they focus intentionally on each and every syllables which are actually mentioned in these examples. So, the word intelligent, which is pronounced in English, is actually pronounced as intelligent in Hindi, intelligent. So, we put stress in each and every syllable without swallowing unstressed syllables, which is not the case in English. Similarly, remember is the way how we actually produce, a Hindi speaker would produce this particular word, which is not the case in English, which is how we say remember. So, this is when we understand how stresses could be understood. Whereas in English, the weakly stressed syllables which are has, and, was, to, etc., the verbs and the conjunctions, we also put stress while we speak these words in Hindi. But in English, these are weak stressed syllables, weak stressed words in English. Okay. Now, what we are going to see in our second part of this video are the general issues which are complex nature of English phonological system, differences between English and Hindi sounds, and the variety of English accents. So, there are very common issues which we need to be understood, which is needed to be underlined and discussed properly. So, thank you, and let's catch up in the second part of this video.